discussion brought to you by the Australasian Women in Emergencies Network, also known as AWE. My name is Bridget and I'm the current president of AWE. And with us on the Zoom today, we have members of the committee who can wave their hands and let you know that they're here. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land where I'm seated today. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and of course extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples viewing today. Just a quick update on New Zealand. I know people will have seen the news that there were earthquakes off the coast of New Zealand last night, which led to tsunami warnings across New Zealand. We're very relieved to be able to report that these have been downgraded to a beach and marine threat only, and all people who have evacuated are now able to return. So a huge sigh of relief for our colleagues and our friends in New Zealand, all of whom I think have been through enough over the past few years and really do not need a further disaster to cope with. So a little bit about AWE. The Australasian Women in Emergencies Network is a membership-based organisation. We promote, support and recognise the contributions of women in emergency management and disaster resilience. We offer our members, who are right across Australia, New Zealand and beyond, a whole range of benefits, including events, networking, mentoring, scholarships, newsletters and more. I really want to acknowledge today that this may have been a difficult week for many women. And on behalf of AWE, I'd really like to state the following to anyone who is a victim survivor of sexual harassment, assault or rape. We believe you. We are sorry that it happened to you, and we are here for you. Grace Tame stated yesterday that when we share, we heal. We reconnect and we grow, both as individuals and as united, strengthened collective. History, lived experience, the whole truth, unsanitized and unedited, is our greatest learning resource, and it's what informs social and structural change. So I encourage anyone who may be feeling distressed to please reach out for help. And of course, anyone in need of immediate support, please phone 1-800-RESPECT. Thank you. On to the business of the day. A little bit of housekeeping. Where possible, we'd encourage you to keep your cameras on, but your microphones muted. That way we can see who's with us, we can see your smiling faces, and importantly, get to know you. If you've got a question for any of our panellists or have any technical difficulties, please just pop it in the chat. Our moderators will go through all of the questions and we'll select as many as possible to be answered. But please keep in mind, we do only have an hour, and so we will not be able to get to all questions, although we'll do our best. And finally, we are recording today's panel session. Anyone who doesn't wish to be recorded, please turn your camera off, and we'll make the recording available on our website for people to view at a later date. So the theme for International Women's Day in 2021 is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. And this theme celebrates the tremendous efforts by women and girls around the world in shaping a more equal future. International Women's Day events right around the world are sharing incredible stories from women who inspire, lead and are committed to making a difference every day. And we're here today to hear from 4 such women, each of whom will share their experiences and reflections of being a woman in emergency management and disaster resilience, their journeys to leadership and the future for women. And today we're really lucky to have quite the international panel. We've got an awesome lineup of women from the USA, from New Zealand, and right here in Australia. So I'm going to do some really quick introductions and then we'll start to hear from each of our panellists. Our first panellist, who's going to give us a wave, is all the way from the United States. It's Emily, and I'm not sure how to pronounce her surname. And when we get to speaking with her, she can let us know how to pronounce that. Thanks, Emily. We also have Deputy Commissioner Deb Abbott giving us a wave here from Melbourne. Jamie Morganbesser from Queensland, also giving us a wave. And Elizabeth Mcnaughton from New Zealand. I'm going to open up our panel discussion by asking each of our panellists, how did you get to where you are today? tell us a bit about your journey, tell us a bit about your career, and tell us a bit about yourselves. I'm going to start today with Emily, all the way from the US. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Emily Troisi. No worries about not knowing that. And my pronouns are she, her. And first, I just want to acknowledge that I live in Boulder, Colorado in the United States, which is the unceded homelands of the Cheyenne, Ute, and Arapaho peoples. And I also just want to acknowledge and thank the many Indigenous peoples from which we learn from and work with in our network that I'm going to be sharing a little bit about tonight, and whose leadership in living better with wildfire is absolutely critical. And so if possible, I think I can drop some links in the chat, but we've got some really amazing stories on our blog, and I'd love to share those with all of you about their work. So I'm the Associate Director for the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, and I've been with the network for over 6 years now, and really lucky 2 of my colleagues are here tonight listening. I'm very honored to be included among such an amazing group of women because I have such a personal passion for emergency management and disaster resilience, and I've definitely had kind of a wandering path to get here. I have a master's in natural resource management from the University of New Hampshire, and my interest has always been in working with communities. And how I stumbled into the wildfire world is kind of a bit of a roundabout story, so I'll kind of gloss over it a little bit, but I basically landed my dream job after working a number of part-time jobs and volunteering a lot and talking to a lot of people for informational interviews after graduate school. Working for a national network means I get to work with people all over the country and support their work by helping design learning and training opportunities around wildfire, creating space to build relationships and access support from peers and more. And what I've learned is that by creating meaningful connection and making space for the opportunity to share failures and successes beyond just that surface level stuff, we can help move good work forward, even when we have different social political contexts or different relationships with wildfire. And so through my network, I get to interact with nonprofits, government agencies, researchers, community grassroots groups, tribal partners, homeowners associations, and more. And so through my work in wildfire and through my work with FACNet is how I actually discovered my interest in emergency management. And I basically just began as much continuing education as I could get my hands on. I completed a certificate in emergency management, began volunteering at my local Office of Emergency Management about 2 years ago. And this year I actually had my first 2 actual activations in both our pandemic response and our wildfires this past fall, serving as a section chief. And I wish that I knew emergency management was a field that I could get into a little bit earlier when I was in school, because I kind of thought that there was just one track. Most of the folks I knew were former law enforcement or military. And until I started going, or more operations based, and until I started going into the natural hazards workshop here in Colorado and just interacting with more folks in emergency management in general, I didn't know that there were multiple pathways. And so I'm just really particularly interested in helping communities think about recovery and getting more people at the table and involved in living better with wildfire. And so that's what our network aims to do. And just thank you very much for having me here tonight.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that rundown, Emily. And I think what's really amazing about the work you're doing is that it really embraces the notion of shared responsibility and collaboration. It just sounds really fascinating. And one day I hope we can hear a lot more about it. Our next speaker that I'd like to ask them a bit more about themselves is Deb Abbott. Deb, over to you.
Thank you, Bridget. So, yes, Deb Abbott, and I actually came into emergency management in probably a little bit of the same way, sort of fell into it after a quite long career in policing. So I had started my earlier career in policing within Victoria in Australia. And as I sort of navigated my path through that organisation, one of the areas that I ended up in was as the Assistant Commissioner for State Emergencies and Support Command. And it was not necessarily an area that I'd particularly targeted within my policing career, and by chance fell into it. But it was one of the best experiences of my life, because whilst policing had certainly a strong, public safety focus, I found that once I fell into the world of emergency management, the connection with community was virtually on steroids. And it was one of those fascinating areas where the involvement of volunteers, the work of so many agencies and coming all together, I really got more of a sense of how it is that community and all the communities, be it government, industry, and right across, as I said, our volunteers and those that work in emergency services do all come together and really play such a shared role in making things work. And it's probably that sense of service that comes out, as I said, not just from those that are in formal positions like myself, but even more so from the members of our various communities that just have that passion for wanting to help. And as I said, it probably to an extent opened my eyes to a whole new different world. And whilst I've only been with Emergency Management Victoria for a couple of years, it's been quite a heady couple of years, because we went from, as soon as I joined, we had probably the worst fire season we'd had for a decade, and then COVID and a range of other emergencies. And as I said, if I ever wanted to sit on the edge of a balcony to see how it is the greatest show on earth for how we all come together, then this past couple of years has been it. So that's really my story. It's as I said, not necessarily by design in the last couple of years, but probably given the type of person I am, a little bit of luck and just falling into the right place at the right time probably played a greater role than it ever has in my career.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Deb, and really great reflections, particularly from someone who's got such extraordinary experience, with the police, but coming into the emergency management sector. And I think your comments about the role of volunteers is really critical, because they play such a crucial role in helping communities both respond to and recover from emergencies. And we know that the number one reason that people volunteer is not only wanting to give back, but wanting to give back during times of crisis. So they're really, really critically important. Thank you, Deb. Next, I'd like to introduce Elizabeth from New Zealand, which is now safe. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Bridget. Kia ora koutou. My name's Elizabeth Mcnaughton, and you could say that my career has quite literally been a series of disasters all over the world. But firstly, I'd like to talk about this idea of Kamua Kamuri. So this is a Māori concept that we walk backwards into the future. So in my family, I come from a long line of amazing nurses. I mean, they're everywhere. My mother, my grandmothers, my mother-in-law, my sister, and they really set in me the foundations of compassion, of service, of some really great values, which I'm deeply grateful for. And then I really cut my teeth on this stuff with the Boxing Day Asian tsunami in South Asia, which was really quite something for somebody starting out. And, I was privileged with an extraordinary boss who was really just world class, but his English wasn't that great. And so I really spent a lot of time drafting his correspondence, going through, his presentations, talking through how to do something, diplomacy, these kind of things. And I thought, really, is this what I should be doing? I've got, this is this huge disaster and these sorts of things. But actually that taught me so much from him and really set me up for the next steps. And it really made me think how far you go depends on who you travel with. And I've had an incredible number of amazing people to travel with. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about OAR and us here today, is that we can really all help us travel what is becoming an increasingly difficult and complex world. Even starting with shaky mornings in New Zealand today, right? Like it's how we travel together that determines where we land. And so yeah, that's then. Okay, thought, okay, I'll come back to New Zealand, good for bushworks and a baby, and the Christchurch earthquakes happened. So led the recovery work for the New Zealand Red Cross. I also jumped between roles also with the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and led their learning work there, which this real passion for learning, collecting stories around the world, doing a Winston Churchill Fellowship, collected 100 interviews with crisis leaders around the world, and all of that set the foundation for our company, Hummingly, which supports people with stress and uncertainty around the world with products and trainings, and is proving to be really quite on point at the minute. And speaking of traveling with great people, some of you will know my co-founder, Jolie Wills, who I have the privilege of traveling with. So thank you.
Fantastic, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for letting us know about your really extraordinary and worldwide journey in emergency management. It's truly humbling to think about what you've been through and the contribution that you've made. And thank you so much for being here today. Our last panelist today is Jamie. Jamie from Queensland. Where are you?
Here I am. Thanks so much, Bridget. And my name is Jamie Morgan-Besser, and I'm coming to you from the lands of the Yagara and the Turrbal people here in Brisbane. And I too wish to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I want to thank you to the OAR Network for inviting me to participate with the other incredible women in this panel. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity. Upon you asking this question, I was reflecting on when I first started, and it was a decade ago. And as I mentioned, I'm here in Brisbane, which is where I come from. And if anyone remembers 10 years ago, Queensland, which is where Brisbane is, 75% of the state was actually underwater due to the Queensland floods. Now, at the time, I had previously worked in the law space and had finished uni in law, and realised very quickly that's not what I wanted to continue to do, and so engaged a recruiter to help me look for a job. And they came to me during that time with an offer and said, you know, there's some work going at the Australian Red Cross, would you be interested? And I recall being a little bit panicked and thinking, oh gosh, well, and even saying out loud, funnily enough, I don't know how to take blood, but I'm really, really happy to learn. I'm eager. It's no problem. Like, and you know, they looked at me, eyes rolled. No, you goose. In fact, actually, Red Cross has got an entire humanitarian emergency services arm that they're needing support in and trying to increase capacity. So it was an interesting. What started as a 2-week contract with the Red Cross, just supporting the team in the Queensland office, which had been evacuated due to the floods. And what started as a 2-week contract turned into a 2-month contract, turned into a 2-year contract. And, you know, they fed me once and I could never leave. But it was a very interesting pivotal moment in my life where it really set my trajectory. I just didn't really know what I wanted to do after university. I definitely knew I didn't want to do law again. But this disaster management, disaster recovery opportunity came up, and as I said, 10 years later, here I am. I've also worked across government, and I've actually worked at Emergency Management Victoria with some of the team members here. Shout out to Lisa and again, and have also worked in the Queensland government with the Queensland Reconstruction Authority in the recovery space as well. So I've got a really unique understanding of the domestic incomings and outgoings of disaster recovery across the space. I have 2 children, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so that keeps my life pretty busy. But in November 2019, I had my son, who's now 1. I was on maternity leave in 2019, heading into 2020, and was watching, as everyone was, the horror unfold on the TV with regards to the 2019-2020 bushfires. With a little baby, and just you knew that I needed to get back into the space. So very soon after, I touched base with my colleagues at the Red Cross and said, give me anything and everything. I really, really want to help. they kind of said, just give it a little bit, you've just had a baby. But I wouldn't take no for an answer. So alas, here I am back at the Red Cross in the national recovery space. And I'm really fortunate to be the lead for the Disaster Recovery Advisor and Mentors Australia program. And what that program does is connects trained volunteer mentors who have professional and personal experience in disaster recovery. And they connect those with communities who are in the midst of their own recovery journey and sort of make sense of what's going on and supports them in community-led recovery. So it's a great privilege to be back, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And like our other panelists, you've had a really different journey into emergency management. And I think that is something that makes it really exciting and makes our network really exciting, is that diversity of skills and experience, the diversity of the backgrounds that we all bring, the various skills and experience that we all bring, and particularly our panelists today. I'm curious about leadership and thinking about a leader who inspired you during your journey, or somebody who might inspire you today who's a leader. And Elizabeth, you mentioned the gentleman around the Boxing Day tsunamis earlier, but I'm wondering, is there anybody else for you, Elizabeth, that has inspired you or inspires you today?
Well, I'll choose someone who's inspiring me at the minute. And I looked up a quote from her, and I'll read that first. And she says about leadership, if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. Does anyone have any idea who that is? Okay, that is Dolly Parton. Dolly is incredible in my view. Why she's on my mind recently is just the way they call her the great unifier, right? The way that people look up to her, they respect her, they listen to her across all the sorts of walks of life and the political spectrums. And I think that more and more, thinking about our leadership, we need to think about how to be unifiers in this world that is increasingly divisive. So I've been looking to her for that. Also, I love how business savvy she is. She got brand before anyone else got brand and awareness. And I think that's something that's challenging for many women. And I think too, just recently with COVID, investing early in vaccines, and now she's all over the web. She's changed her songs to, you've got vaccine, 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 right? Like, it's the communications and the savviness behind it on these big issues. And I think what I like most and what inspires me is she's done it all her way. And, you may not look at Dolly Parton and think she's a feminist, but, just listen to that 9 to 5 anthem to get you going in the morning and think about when she did that, but still manages to be this great unifier. So, yeah, that's who's been on my mind recently.
What a fantastic left of field answer. I just think that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was absolutely fabulous.
Yeah,
Deb, what about you during your career or more recently?
It's a really interesting question because I have to say that for me, it's not necessarily one leader that inspires, but rather a multitude of them and the actions that they take or the way they behave at particular times. And rather than latch on to single entities, because we are all, only human, and not everything we do is necessarily great leadership, throughout our entire careers. But certainly people have inspired me along the way throughout my journey, so to speak, and at different times, and for all the what I would call the right reasons. The ones that probably inspire me most are those that are truly without ego and look to what it is they do for others within their leadership. So they're not necessarily the famous people. So the people that tend to inspire me, I could count probably 5 or 10 managers and role models throughout my career that have really shown me that is probably the greatest gift of leadership is when it looks towards what it is you can do for your people, what it is that you can do to bring people up behind you into achieving their aspirations and roles. So I could say some names and you would all go, oh, I don't know who that is, but again, you know, key men and women, you know, all throughout that, as I said, really, as I said, in that balance of, you know, why they were in leadership roles wasn't necessarily for reward, but it was really around what it is they could do and the responsibility that they actually held within leadership and knowing that it took that forward. So, as I said, not necessarily one single person.
What a fantastic answer, Deb. And as you were speaking, I was reflecting on my own experiences of leaders throughout my life and you know, who's inspired me. And like you, they tend to be the quiet achievers and the people that don't have the big public profile. So thank you so much for sharing that. Emily, what about you? Tell us about a leader who's inspired you during your journey.
Thank you. Well, so kind of funny, my mentorship in the wildfire world has actually been largely from other women, which has been really amazing and is not the kind of traditional experience of many people in wildfire. You know, my first prescribed fire experience, for example, was at a women's training exchange in California, which was just an absolutely amazing experience. Many of the coordinators around the country that I work with are women. My whole staff team is women. And so similar to Deb, I feel like I've really learned and taken a little piece of all of those people that I've been really fortunate to work with and learn from throughout the years. My mentorship in emergency management has been all men so far, so it's been a different experience. But one of them in particular has really been my champion and is the reason that I've gotten a lot of the leadership experiences that I have today. And so I just wanted to echo Deb's comment about kind of like leading from behind and bringing other people up behind you, because he's really done that for me and really encouraged my my leadership experience in the volunteer program. But I also just wanted to talk about our network director and my good friend, Michelle, who's actually here today. So hope I don't embarrass you, Michelle, but I just wanted to acknowledge her because to me, she is a super talented and thoughtful leader. And to me, she's the definition of lead from behind. She's always putting her staff needs and the network needs first. Front and center, and is always encouraging us to seek continuing education opportunities. She's been a huge encouragement of my volunteer work in emergency management, and she looks out for our health too, our self-care, especially in times of COVID. She's a fantastic agenda designer and facilitation expert, and I've learned so much about effective and engaging workshop design from her. She's unafraid to speak up when there's unbalance or systemic injustices that need to be talked about, and she listens. And I mean, she really listens to people and she prioritizes from hearing all of the voices in the room. She's a lifelong learner, and her way of managing our remote collaborative team is amazing. And I can't have asked for a better mentor in this work. So I just wanted to give her a special thank you as well.
Well, she sounds amazing. We'd like to steal her if we could. Thanks, Emily. Jamie, what about you?
It's such an interesting question because there are so many people that come to mind about who have inspired me and who continue to inspire me in their own leadership. But I recall when I first started with the Australian Red Cross some 10 odd years ago. For those of you who don't know her, Dr. Kate Brady is the National Recovery Advisor for the Australian Red Cross. And when I came and joined the recovery team, she sat me down, we had coffee and cake. She said, you know, very kindly welcomed me to the team. And said, I've got a really important question to ask you. And the question is, are you going to be a professional or a martyr? And I was a little bit taken aback because I didn't really know. And she said, now, before you answer, if you're going to be a martyr, that is not a problem. But I know that you're going to say yes to everything. I know that you're going to work stupid long hours. You're going to, try to work your bum off, and it's just going to all fall in a heap. And that's okay. I'm just not going to invest in you because I know that you'll burn out and eventually you're not going to be good for anyone. Or are you going to be a professional whereby you're going to say, no, actually, I can't take that on. I'm going to leave when I need to. I'm going to respect my own time and well-being. And as she was explaining this to me, I thought, I was in my very early 20s, and I thought previously that I'm going to work harder than anyone. I'm going to show everyone how capable I am. And I was thinking, can I be a professional martyr? No, probably not. But just that question of just placing that perspective as one of the first things that she did has really allowed me to respect my own well-being and acknowledge, actually, in order to be really effective, you have to put interventions in place whereby you're taking care of yourself. So I like to think of myself as a professional. Sometimes I can still fall into the martyr, but that's when I know that I need a break. So Kate really did. And then again, I often reflect on and listen to the podcasts of Dr. Brené Brown and the work that she does around leadership. And she says it turns out that trust is in fact earned in the smallest of moments when it comes to leaders. It is earned not through heroic deeds or even highly visible actions, but through paying attention, listening, and gestures of genuine care and connection. So always reflective of those, making those human connections with people in that terms of leadership. Thank you.
Can I just say that Dr. Kate Brady is a huge inspiration of mine too, and she's asked me that question as well. And I still think I'm a recovering martyr, definitely working towards that professional.
That's fantastic, and a great question too, I think, particularly for parents of young children who can be, who really can be overworked simply by the demands of having small children in the home, having a career, paid job or volunteer work can be really, really tough to balance. So, that's a really key question to ask, and I guess something for us all to think about when we're working with people that have young children at home or other caring responsibilities. So fantastic example, Jamie, and I understand Kate somewhere on the call, so well done and kudos to you, Kate, for thinking of that question and asking it of people. It's absolutely fantastic. So the next question I've got is asking you to think a little bit more about what leadership means to you and how you're imparting your leadership values to other people. So I might start with Deb on this one, but Deb's had an amazing career in Victoria Police, and I guess interesting for you, Deb, to reflect on your leadership roles within Victoria Police, as well as now your more recent experience in emergency management.
Yeah, it's and again, I probably have to reflect on a little bit of my own career, and I'm just noting some of the comments in the chat around, or how is it that we can empower other women or make the path open for young women entering the sector. And I even saw that somebody said, so yeah, a lot of people have fallen into this, but how is it that you actually navigate a path for this? And I'll just tell a bit of a story as to what alerted me to how it is maybe one can navigate through into what I would call the key decision-making roles that women are sadly so less visible in and/or allowed to play in. And when I was quite young in my career as a police officer, I entered the force married and started my family. And what it highlighted to me was how the construct of emergency management, particularly in the areas of your sort of paid and formalized, I'll call them the uniform roles, for want of a better term, and how linear it was, and how unforgiving it was of interrupting career in order to navigate that path. And at the time that I had my first child, I I soon sort of realised, because I was suddenly excluded from various pathways of career because of that interruption to my career, that it highlighted to me that how structurally flawed a lot of things are within the emergency management sector, and how hard it is for women to actually navigate through. And it did open my eyes to how difficult it is. And I virtually committed myself from that day forth to try and break down those structural barriers. And whilst definitely I have some wonderful colleagues who work so hard on the advocacy side, to be hindered constantly by what is embedded structural deficiencies that allow the progress of women is one of those areas that I think we do need to pay even more attention to. And I'm talking about a career that was, 30 years ago, and those structural deficiencies are still there. They're still there. And it does make it extraordinarily hard for us to get young women through into what I would call those key decision-making areas, because it's unforgiving in terms of what it is that we're allowed to, or where we're allowed to play, because it means that people would have to step aside from their power roles and let us in. So as I said, back to my story, I ended up having my first son and returned to work after 6 months rather than taking a full year off. And if I was to say what was one of those factors in why it is I managed to navigate to either assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner over in EMV, it was because I sacrificed time with my child. And that is the difficulty I think that we face going forward in terms of leadership within emergency management, and how it is we need to really work hard.
Fantastic, Deb. Thank you so much. And I think you're absolutely right. And the comments are reflecting that as well, that there are still so many, not only systemic barriers, but cultural barriers that we face. And good on you for leading the way, for acknowledging that, and for addressing it, in your work, in your everyday work. It's absolutely fantastic. And it's also one of the reasons why we established the Australasian Women in Emergencies network. It was really evident that there wasn't a voice for women, that there wasn't a place for women to connect and to come together, learn from one another, and hopefully start to break down some of those barriers and actually make a difference. And we're getting there slowly but surely. Jamie, what about you? What does leadership look like for you or mean for you moving forward?
Yeah, it's such a great question. For me, it really comes down to three things as I reflect on the people that I've been fortunate enough to meet as inspiring leaders. It's really come down for me around three things. So self-awareness and one's ability to be vulnerable, one's awareness of others, and thirdly, the ability to be calm and focused on what's important. So for me, those are really, to be a really clear, mindful leader, those are the three things. And I wanted to also to acknowledge what Deb said. There is a huge pressure sometimes on women to, especially those who have caring responsibilities, either with children or elderly parents or puppies or plants, whatever the case may be. There is a huge burden on women. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, Deb. I even find it my own self as a mother of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Sometimes you have to work like you don't have children, and sometimes you have to parent like you don't have a full-time job. So it can be a challenge, but I think the more women who understand those challenges in those decision-making roles, I think it will eventually change for all of us a little bit easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Really wise words there, and really reflect the reality for so many of us around that prioritisation and how we balance those priorities without feeling guilty. You know, we should be able to balance when and where we need to without the associated guilt either coming from us or being placed upon us by organisations or by culture. So thank you so much again. Emily, what about you in terms of your leadership?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to echo, I really appreciate all of the responses that have come before me. And I'm not a mother yet, but I'm very much well aware of the many challenges that many of my colleagues who are mothers or caretakers have experienced throughout their careers. And I just really appreciated Deb's reflection, especially around, I think we have a very similar context here in the US, and that, well, I think it's very important that we bring folks along and bring folks up with us through our own leadership and mentorship. We also have to knock down some of those barriers for people moving forward. And so I just really appreciated Deb's reflection on the importance of that work as well. And I just wanted to, I think everybody's pretty much captured my similar feelings, but I would just add that, I think good leaders also bring some emotional vulnerability to their work and can be flexible and adaptable to the moment. And that they can also ask for help or delegate when needed. And I think that not everybody has leadership or management experience. I personally still feel very young in my career, and that's why I think this network is so important, and having an affinity space like this is so important so people can learn from each other, from people that have faced similar challenges. So I just wanted to, from the US, from my perspective, just say what an amazing opportunity this is that you're providing for other people here.
Thank you so much, Emily. Really appreciate those supportive comments and the fact that you're reflecting too on Jamie and Deb's comments. Elizabeth, what about you?
Yes, what really struck me is listening to Deb's and Jamie is, working the Christchurch earthquakes when my 3-year-old said to me, "Mummy, do you live at the Red Cross?" It's just like, oh, yeah, I feel you and understand. In terms of leadership, I had quite a profound moment. I was doing a Winston Churchill interview and with a woman who was an incredible leader, working in some really tough situations, and she'd really come a bit of a cropper and had some real serious mental health challenges as a result of her job, and she was on leave and working at home. And she said to me, "You know what's, Elizabeth, what scared me from this? It's not actually about me. I think my team were 3 or 4 weeks behind me." And I just had this deep realization that actually we lead others to where we ourselves are at. So if we're in a place where we can find some balance, some calm, some perspective to make decisions, we lead others to that place. But if we are absolutely beyond exhausted in ourselves, we lead others to that place too. And I think that in part is at the heart of why we do what we do at Hummingley, to really help people and communities to find that space where they can lead well and where they can lead others towards towards growth rather than damage, because both are possibilities from these experiences. So I think thinking about leadership, our first task as leaders is actually about how we lead ourselves, right? And if we start there, then we lead others to a good place too. So, yeah.
Really wise words, Elizabeth. We can't expect anybody to follow in our footsteps where we're not prepared to go or shouldn't be, for our own well-being and for the well-being of our families and our colleagues, and the work that we do and how that impacts on the work that we do. We've had a comment here for older women in this network. Do we find that age is an opportunity to leadership, and how does that work? And I'm just reflecting on my own journey. Certainly when my 3 children were young, I wouldn't have dreamt of taking up a leadership opportunity. I just personally did not have the capacity. I was able to go to work and do what I could do to contribute to my field, but I just didn't have that capacity to be able to stretch myself any further. And my children getting older has really opened up time for me and opened up my capacity to be able to take on new and different challenges in my professional life. That's just my personal reflection. I'm really interested. Please put your reflections in the chat, because we're all keen to really learn from one another in this environment. What I'm really interested is having a think about, for each of our panelists to reflect on, what advice would you give young women coming up, young women that are looking to leadership roles, young women that you've identified as maybe being a future leader? What advice would you give to them about what's ahead of them? And I'll start again with, I might start with Emily on this one. Emily, what do you think?
Well, first off, apologies if you hear my dog barking. She just heard something exciting outside. I love that question. Thank you so much I think Amanda asked it. The first thing I thought of, actually, we just, in FactNet, we host a book club twice a year. And one of the books that we just read this past year was called A Field Guide to Climate Anxiety. And it's a great book, but some of the lessons and some of the major takeaways from that book were all around making sure that you have a vision and hope for the future, and some idea of what you're working towards. Basically, the premise is this: the author is a teacher, and she was noticing that her students, especially those who work in the environmental field, were starting to feel really depressed and not feeling a lot of hope about the work that they were doing. And so she just advised her students to find a vision and find something that you're working towards, and move towards that. And then also in my career as well, I mean, finding people that I can lean on and go to for support and mentorship, finding good people who are excited about the work that you're doing and who want to chat with you about it and kind of keep that energy going has been really monumental for me. So I would encourage young leaders to get as many opportunities as they can, just to, put themselves out there and try something new. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do right away, so I just kind of stumbled my way through things. But through that, I met some amazing people who helped me find my path.
Fantastic comments, Emily. And I think your reflection on having a vision is a really important one. And I think I can really confidently say that each of our panelists has really demonstrated that you can hear the passion for what they're doing in their voices, and then the passion for emergency management and disaster resilience and the work that they're doing as a real driver, and a real driver for their leadership and where they're headed. So thank you for those reflections, Emily. What about you, Jamie? What would you, in the thick of being a mum of young children and being a leader, what advice would you give to other young women?
I think engaging with networks like the OR network is a great start. So sometimes there are opportunities that you never find out about, as an example. So working with people in the OR network who have access to different job ads as an opportunity, or volunteering opportunities is just one thing. So just making connections with as many people in the space, or I've previously done it before and not afraid to admit it, but picking up, LinkedIn has become a really incredible tool in regards to looking for people who have got the career that I aspire to work towards, picking up the phone and saying, can we have a chat? How did you do what you did? What sort of pathway did you follow? And it's just asking people how it is that they did. So another thing that I'm also taking the lead on at Red Cross is working with our volunteer knowledge unit on behalf of John Richardson. And these are people who, still university students really wanting to come into the space, and they're the future leaders moving forward in the disaster resilience, recovery and response space. So I guess it's finding those opportunities as you can, going or even calling up organisations who have a lead responsibility in response, recovery and resilience, and just asking the question, putting your name down to volunteer, or, as a way to start. But certainly reaching out. If you don't have all the answers, just ask. People are really, really happy to help.
They certainly are, Jamie, and it's one of the things that I love about the OR network is I know I can pick up the phone or send an email to any one of the women here or within our network who work across an extraordinary diversity of sectors under that umbrella of emergency management and disaster resilience, and I can pick their brains for their expertise to be able to connect with somebody that might be able to support me for opportunities and advice, and it's a really fantastic thing to be able to do, and I think it's something that women are particularly good at doing, is actually, you know, picking up the phone and reaching out. And I think your advice to encourage young women to do that is absolutely spot on. Deb, what about you? Advice for up and coming young leaders or up and coming women in the sector?
I probably follow on from all the comments that fellow panel members have made, particularly around networks and looking at it at what others have done. But as a rule of thumb, I like the path less travelled, because, as I said, there's some lovely, you know, structural inhibitors that have been placed in our way, and it's a bit like our brains. You know, if something is stopped, it finds another way, and that's often usually the way that can confuse the hell out of those established networks that lead to positions of leadership, and bringing in that different experience and relying on again a strong network of people who again have that leadership bent, that it's not about themselves but it's about others, the ones that will push you forward and drag up the women behind those that are in leadership roles now. Latch on to those, because that will serve, I think, our young leaders and our emerging leaders more than anything else, because they know all the traps, they know all the ones that the hurdles that need to be jumped and how to jump them. As I said within my story, nothing showed me more as to the visibility of what those some of those inhibitors are, and there's ways around them, just like in any career or any journey that you take, and it's finding that way around it, but not doing it on your own, because then you're on your own. So do latch on to people that will almost, you know, the two fish up the stream. You know, one gets washed back, but two will make it. So that would be my advice, and the path less travelled.
Fantastic advice, Deb, and I think there's a really common thread here around using the people that you know as support networks as you go up, latching on to the right people, and being creative about where you're going and what you're doing, and I guess grabbing opportunities when they're presented in front of you, even if it looks like a problem to start with. You never know where that's going to lead you. And I guess, Deb, your experience of being appointed Deputy Emergency Management Commissioner as a bit of a surprise move has opened up an entire new world for you, as you said earlier on. Elizabeth, what about you? Advice for the younger generation?
I would say that leadership is not just about positional power, that we all have opportunities to lead where we are right now, whether that's in our families, in our communities, in the different activities that we undertake. It is not something that you do when you get to a certain job or a certain role or a certain position. And so that all of the skills that are involved in leadership can be utilised to great effect in many different spots. I would also say, coming back to Dolly Parton doing it her way, also referencing our New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, it's the same message. She does it her way. She does leadership her way. So those are two examples that I really look to, and that I have always tried to do in my leadership, is to lead according to who I am and my values, and not affect my leadership according to those structural impediments that Deb was sharing with us. And that is challenging and quite rightly, as all the other speakers have mentioned, it requires you kind of having your own personal board of wise guides and advisors to help shepherd you through that. But yeah, for these young people to really choose some leaders that they admire, because quite often when we choose people we admire, they are actually qualities that we haven't, and that are emerging in ourselves. So unfortunately for me, singing is not emerging in me, but it's a general rule of thumb. So that's what I'd say, in addition to the amazing things the other panelists have contributed.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And echoing that, somebody in the chat said a little bit earlier on that we're all leaders in some area or another, and it doesn't have to be a formal leadership role. You can be a leader leading your family. You can be leading yourself through your studies. You can be leader of a small community group or volunteer group, or you can be, you know, the leader or the 2IC of entire divisions and departments. And it really doesn't matter what you're doing, is applying this, you know, moving ahead knowledge and insight, having a vision, having some values behind that, and ensuring that the people coming up behind you have an easier path than the path that you had along the way. We've only got about 5 more minutes, which I'm really, really sorry about, because I am so enjoying this conversation, and I can really tell by the number of comments that are coming through that it's been incredibly engaging. So I'm going to finish off by asking, what are some of the positive opportunities that you can see in a post-COVID world for women? So for women broadly, and it might be for women across the globe, it might be women in the emergency management sector, or it might be women as leaders. What are some of the exciting opportunities that you can see coming up for women, and that we can help promote and that we can all get behind? And I might start with you, Jamie.
Thanks so much, Bridget. It's such a great question. I think if I reflect on some of the challenges first and then the opportunities, I think COVID, like any disaster, has exacerbated any pre-existing inequalities in society. And often we've spoken about it, it falls to women to manage the lion's share of the caring responsibilities. However, I think in a post-COVID world, this opportunity to work from home and that flexibility is something that I think we should harness moving forward. We've shown that we can do the job. You know, the wheels don't fall off. So I think there's certainly an opportunity to do that with regards to leadership is just the flexibility. And I would also note, because COVID has impacted the world, it had been a challenge to sort of highlight the psychosocial impacts of disasters previously. So again, there's an opportunity there, I think, that presents itself moving forward to really highlight the psychosocial impacts of disasters moving forward.
Thanks, Jamie. Great reflections. And I think the world has really changed so much, and it's such a good opportunity for us to really grab and hold on to some of those changes and embed them and make them part of our new normal. What about you, Elizabeth?
Well, to answer this question, I'm just going to read a card from our cards, Hummingly cards for calamity. Before the quake, I used to think if someone expects something of me, I must do it. Being obliging was part of my social conditioning. The long road after disaster shook it out of me. I know now that my time and energy is finite and life is short. I feel much more confident saying no and prioritizing. So the question is, well, the opportunity is, I'm really hoping that through this COVID experience, more women will really learn to kind of ditch the expectation wagon, because there are just so many priorities and it's all competing and it's all hard. You know, we've all had to say no more. We've all had to really think about our energy and reprioritize it. And I'm just hoping that those characteristics will continue, and that more women will feel confident to ditch that expectation wagon that is very heavy to carry around, and you don't know until you ditch it just how heavy it is.
Fantastic advice, Elizabeth. We could probably all take that on board, including those of us who might be just that little bit older. Thank you so much. Jamie, sorry, Emily. Sorry, Jamie, Emily.
Took your ear off.
Thank you. So, you know, I think there's been a lot of lessons learned around disaster this year, namely who continues to be most impacted by our current system, kind of like Jamie was mentioning about exacerbating already existing inequalities. And speaking from the US perspective, COVID has been disproportionately challenging for women, and especially women of color. There was just a report that came out that talked about how the majority of job losses this year were held by women of color, and mothers have also been disproportionately impacted. And so the reason I highlight that, and I want to just point on, you know, I think with our experience with COVID and then also some of the compounding disasters we've had here, I think it's really highlighted and really shown a spotlight on just some of the flaws in our current systems that continue to perpetuate exacerbating inequalities. And so I think we have a lot of work to do in emergency management in order to make our response and our recovery, more just and equitable. And I really think that women are primed to be some of those leaders to help move our system forward. And so I hold a lot of space and I keep a lot of hope. And I continue to be really inspired by the people that I work with daily who are actively trying to make that happen. So thank you very much for having me here tonight.
That's wonderful, inspiring words, Emily, and certainly music to my ears in my day job at VCOS. You know, we always say that a community is only as resilient as its underlying functioning. And so if you have disadvantage, marginalisation, poverty, you're already well behind the 8 ball when it comes to disaster resilience. So thank you for that terrific reminder. And a last reflection from Deb.
Thank you, Bridget. I think Emily's points around, you know, how the inequalities have been exacerbated through COVID and how much that's brought it into perhaps the narrative, I suppose, for everyone. I do think that hopefully a little bit like Elizabeth, that the trappings of wealth and power do subside a bit as people reflect on their lives, and not just women, but all humanity around what is really important, because I do think a kinder world is a kinder place for women leadership to thrive in. And if we don't have that focus on compassion and those flaws aren't highlighted, if nothing else, COVID has highlighted them, you know, more than anything else, then if we don't have that, then leadership that does draw from a base of compassion and for helping and caring, then I think it's very hard for us to thrive in that world. But I do hold hope that that will be where we land, and that we don't quickly rebound back into something that is less caring, because I don't think women do well in that. I did want to just quote one thing. You know, we've just had a health emergency, and as I was drawn into emergency management, and we were preparing for pandemics many years ago, and it was often said to me, oh yes, that's health sectors, you know, that's heavily dominated by women, the health sector. And the UN recently said that 70% of health workers are women, but 70% of health executives are men. And out of COVID, a recent study found that of the voices that are heard in media, that men voices are heard 3 times more than women in a health emergency, one of a caring emergency. Isn't that amazing? So it does highlight how far we do have to go to make ourselves heard. And if I could say to everybody on here that Elizabeth's right, leadership takes many forms, but we can't let ourselves not be heard. And that is true leadership. We do have to look after, you know, so many of women who are doing it tough, you know, and if we've got the opportunity, let's do our best.
Hear, hear, Deb. What absolutely fabulous words for us to end on. And again, I'm so sorry we can't continue on for the rest of the afternoon, sharing in our collective wisdom. Thank you, everybody, for coming along today. International Women's Day provides us with an opportunity to reflect on the leadership roles we all play at work, at home, and in our communities. And I think we can agree that we're an incredibly inspiring bunch, and particularly our panellists today. So thank you, a huge thank you to each of our panellists for sharing in their experiences, insights, and collective wisdom. And thank you to everybody for your amazing, thoughtful, insightful, and inspiring comments. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for taking a time out. Remember, Australasian Women in Emergencies Network is here for you. We're here to help promote, support, and recognise all of the work that you do, and importantly, to connect you with other women. So jump on our website, tell all your friends and family about us, and we will see you very soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.